This right here is the G15 Advantage Edition. It normally uses dedicated Radeon graphics, but today we are going to look at the much cooler integrated graphics of the Ryzen 9 5900HX. This is a Ryzen 9 APU technically, but the most similar desktop counterpart is probably the 5700G. Let's go over the specs just quickly. This is the G513QY. It features the Ryzen 9 5900HX with the Vega 8 integrated graphics, how I already mentioned. It also has the RX 6800M dedicated graphics, but today we're going to keep them disabled. On top of that, 16 gigabytes of 3200 MHz dual rank RAM, so already the good stuff, not like in Jared's tech video. It also has a 1TB SSD and a 165Hz QHD display, but we're playing with integrated graphics today, so 1080p or lower for today. Let's go into the tests. Forza Horizon 5 is quite well optimized, and it performed for integrated graphics especially quite well. 1080p with the low preset, which still looks quite good in my opinion. I also had FXAA enabled to get rid of some of the aliasing. 48 FPS with 27 and 21 for the 1% loss and 0.1% loss respectively. What else to say? Perfectly good experience. The game still looked decent, like 343 Playground did a good job making the game look good and run well on all sorts of hardware. So to the next game. This one is a bit older, GTA 4. It's still an absolute system melter because of its optimization. At 1080p medium settings, I unfortunately couldn't even set the textures higher, so I settled for all around medium. 53 FPS, pretty good. Expect a bit lower frame rate when more stuff is going on, like a police chase. Quite comparable to the Xbox One backward compatible version, if you have played or looked at that, with a bit better graphics here, obviously. Totally fine. Doom Eternal is a fantastically optimized game, although it didn't perform as good as I expected. Still absolutely playable. 1080p with DRS enabled on the low settings, 64 for the average, which is plenty playable. I also tested it at 900p with DRS disabled, 53 FPS it averaged. Cyberpunk 2077. Not sure what I expected here. It was playable. Pretty comparable to like the Xbox One version. In some ways a bit better and some a bit worse. 1080p, I set the resolution scaling / sharpening to 75%, everything on low. The average 28 FPS. The frame rate dropped a tiny bit to like the mid-20s. Driving through Night City. In the outskirts it's a bit higher, but it still was an enjoyable experience with not that much aliasing going on, with 18 and 11 for the 1% and 0.1% lows. Battlefield recently got the second update, which improved a ton of stuff, but the performance is still not on point. 720p with DRS on. It averaged 54 FPS. It sounds playable, but the 1% and 0.1% lows were absolutely horrible with 5 and 4. DRS disabled, 35 FPS with again horrible stuttering, 6 and 3. It varies from map to map how bad the stuttering gets, but it happened on all maps and game modes that I've tested, like Conquest, Breakthrough, and a couple of Portal game modes. So the experience on the Vega 8 integrated graphics of this Ryzen 9 was not great. I wouldn't call this playable. So this is in my opinion the worst result of all the games tested today. Hopefully it will get a bit better in the future. I also decided to look at GTA Vice City, the Definitive Edition. It's the most demanding game of the recently re-released trilogy, and Random Gaming in HD has already done a couple of videos on it. which I would recommend checking out, playing it with the Athlon, for example. I decided to settle for 1080p low, but I still had the shadows enabled and set to low, and TAA Plus also enabled to get rid of some of the aliasing. The game still looks quite decent, arguably better than the original, but that's obviously quite subjective if you like the look of the definitive edition or not. It's quite heavy. It performed okay, 41 FPS for the average with 27 for the 1% lows. It's perfectly playable, the frame rate isn't that stable, so it would probably be worth locking it at like 30 FPS if you could deal with it. So yeah, this is what it's like to game on a Ryzen 9 APU. Some cases, like Forza, it's great, others like Battlefield, not so much. If you're going to buy a laptop with a Ryzen 9 5900 HX or HS, should probably perform quite similar. You can absolutely play many games out there. This was fun to test. I am now going to enable the 6800M again. I hope you enjoyed the video. If not, leave a dislike. I wish you well and goodbye.